Welcome back to the next episode of the Before Passing Go podcast with your host, Michael Malfa. Today, I'm joined by one of our favorites and a regular on the show, Andrew Nguyen.
Thank you, Michael. Well, today we have a very interesting topic for everybody. I think it's very interesting. It's a personal favorite of mine. We're going to talk about the fear of rejection, and I think we're going to talk about some of our early days on how we overcame objections.
So let me put it down into perspective. All right, when you say early days now, do you mean early days of your childhood or early days of the business itself? How early are we talking?
I think career-wise, I think it'll be good for our audience to understand, how we became better and masters at this art where we're not afraid of objections. And I think it's just throughout our career and what kind of molded that behavior. I think that will be very interesting for everybody to listen to.
Interesting.
Okay, so let's start with you, Andrew. Rejection. Where would you say was the very first fundamental rejection that you had to endure and say, how am I going to overcome this moving forward?
So I think, 5 years ago 10 years ago now. 10 years ago, I started in insurance sales. I thought that was my first sales gig, but it dates way back. I've done many other sales gig, I guess, in childhood, including selling chocolates and things like that, going door to door, selling chocolate just to win that prize. I started to look back at my career and I realized that, what I thought was the first sales gig wasn't actually the first sales gig, but the first structured sales job that I've had was about 10 years ago when I started as an insurance agent. And this job, my basically 8-hour day was just going out there, knocking on doors, getting people to say yes to you. That was a challenge that I didn't think was going to be that difficult until you're actually on the road. And if you remember, being on the road and getting rejected over and over again was tough. Mm-hmm. It was tough. It was tough to keep going. And the next day, wake up in the morning and go at it again. So that was a very tough thing for me to overcome. And I kind of took a different approach to that. I didn't really wake up in the morning and try to get a yes. I woke up in the morning and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go and look for an objection. And once I get that first objection, you know what, I'm gonna keep looking for another one. So I was looking for that objection. And, my craft was, I'm gonna make my pitch so good that, it makes it difficult to get an objection. And, if I get an objection, that's okay. So I set the expectation as my objection rather than getting a yes all the time. Because when you try to go out there and wake up in the morning and get a yes, and it doesn't happen, that demotivates you.
Disappointed.
Yeah, so it kind of derails your day. So that's what kind of made me motivated to get up in the morning, and it just changed my mindset. Instead of thinking about, I'm desperate trying to get a yes all the time, I'm going to go out there and talk to people. I know they're going to reject me, but, what's there to lose?
Well, now, before we get into the next area, Mike, what about you? This is a very important thing to see if it's on both ends. Why are you laughing?
No, I'm laughing because it's a topic that's, really resonates with me. It's something, we've kind of had to overcome from an early age. So I'm just trying to think in my mind where I want to start this story. But rejection, from an early age, maybe it was chasing girls and getting rejected from girls when you were super young. That's why I'm laughing. See, now I'm just laughing too. You're chasing girls, you're getting rejected. It doesn't feel good, and it hurts your ego. Your ego's hurt, and then the next time, are you able to put your best, forward, your best foot forward, and put yourself back out there again with the same amount of confidence, knowing you've just been rejected. And I would say I was pretty good at that, and I would continue to just push and keep doing what I had to do. And some of my friends knew me for that quality. where I didn't get discouraged easily and I could handle lots of rejection. Then I guess that translated later in life as I entered my career. One of my first jobs, you were talking about sales, was selling Cutco knives. Did you know that?
Oh, I
What,
don't think I know
what?
that about you, Mike.
Selling what?
Cutco knives.
What is that?
Yeah,
Those are good knives.
excellent knives. So what it was is it was like basically almost like multi-level marketing where you had to go out and sell knives to individuals. You had a product, you had to go sell. I was very young. I was probably, I would say 16. I was doing it while I was in school. So I had to be like 16, 17 years old. And you'd go and you'd sell knives to your immediate family. You'd sell knives to your neighbors, to your friends. You'd ask for referrals. And basically you would try to also recruit other salespeople to sell knives for the company, for Cutco.
Wow.
And it was brutal. Like I remember having to go to like family friends and try to sell them a knife. And they're like, no, I'm not interested. And it's just like, what do you do from there? You put your tail between your legs and stop, or you just keep going. So I continued to do that. Didn't necessarily love it, to be honest, but I liked the commission-based sales. I liked that you could control your income. So fast forward, I finished my college degree, finished my university degree, and then I have the opportunity to get into insurance sales. And this is something that, I studied marketing in school, so I was never really interested in getting into sales, to be honest. Although I had a natural knack, I feel like I had a natural knack to talk to people and to overcome objection and rejection. So I got dragged into this business. There was someone I knew that was in it, and they said there's a really good career path in insurance. There's lots of opportunity. You can make a good living. You could, meet great people. You can learn a lot along the way and help individuals and businesses. So they had a good pitch, but I still didn't want to get into sales. And like Andrew mentioned, getting into insurance sales where this was not an inbound role. We both, we both worked at this company called Federated Insurance, and it was 100% outbound sales, just door to door, business to business selling. So eventually I took a chance and I tried it. And it was definitely brutal in the beginning. You start to question, you're working so hard for your dollars in the beginning because you're not getting the traction that you really want in the beginning. So you're stumbling, you're trying to get back up, you're trying to sell, you're failing.
At any point, did you want to give up?
100%. I would say in the first 3 to 6 months was the hardest. First 3 to 6 months, it's like, what am I really doing here? Like, can I make a career out of this? Can I do this for the rest of my life?
I had the same feeling in the first 6 months too. I went to my wife and I told her, I'm like, you know what? 6 months in, and maybe I should go back to my old boss and ask for my job back. It's tough.
I believe it.
Well, do you think that money had an impact on that? Do you feel like you were unsure if the success of it all wasn't going to be there as far as financial freedom?
I'll answer that first. For me, I was still young. I was still living at home. So I had a bit of a buffer. So the decision wasn't rooted in the money for me. The decision was rooted in, do I love getting beat up and rejected every single day? And people look at insurance, in my mind, I felt like, these business owners or these individuals were looking at me like almost like I'm at their mercy. I'm inferior to them. I'm trying to sell them something and I need them. So that's how I was looking at it in the beginning when I was very young. And I was young too. So they kind of took advantage of me. So to be honest, it wasn't, rooted in the money. It was, can I continue to do this for the rest of my career? How about you, Andrew?
For me, I think it's part of, I guess, a skill that I've always wanted to build on. And I remember having a conversation with many people because I was later on in my career. I had a good job. I was working corporate as an analyst, and it just it was a different jump for me. It was very uncomfortable, but I've always liked that challenge, and I've always liked to be in uncomfortable positions. So I had conversations with many individuals, and one of my friends, a close friend of mine, he said to me, he's like, Andrew, like, what do you have to lose? You're learning one of the best skills that you can learn out there,
Most transferable.
And it's a skill that you need to have in life. It's a life skill because you're selling every day, and and he's like, you're one of the best salesperson that I know, And I gave that some thoughts, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. I have this natural knack for selling, but I was never really put into that position to sell anything. So I took that advice, and that's when I just jumped right into it and gave it a try. So it wasn't really the money, but when I was on the field, I made money my goal, like my score, my points. How well I'm doing is being judged by how much I'm actually selling. So it naturally became money as a goalpost, but it wasn't the root and the reason for going into sales and learning it.
It wasn't the driving factor. Money kept score.
Now, you guys are in a space where insurance is, worldwide hated. Hated because, if everyone makes mistakes, then you have to unfortunately jack up everyone's insurance, and then somehow you guys become the bad guys. What about that form of rejection? I mean, in reality, you're not the one purposely doing this, but you are known as now the bad guy. So do you associate being the bad guy, even when you're not, as rejection for your clients?
Yeah. For me, that was also part of the challenge. The challenge was, number one, you're selling a service, but you're also selling a service that a lot of people, are jaded towards. There's a lot of people have bad premonition towards insurance. So it was tough to wrap my head around that. But like Andrew said, when you started to shift your mind frame, your mindset from, hey, you know what? I can actually help people with this skill. I could bring value to them through service, through coverage enhancement, through, giving them the coverage they need for their business to scale. Then I started looking at myself as not necessarily an inferior. I was young, right? I started to look at myself as an equal or someone of high value to their organization. And then when that mindset shifted, I started to go in with more confidence, a more thoughtful process, and really positioning myself as, hey, you know what? I'm going to come here and I'm going to help your business scale. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to ensure that the insurance, all the risk mitigation's in place. The insurance is in place. When you need something, I want to give you peace of mind. That was another thing. Confidence. I started selling confidence. And that's when I really started to enjoy it. My portfolio started to grow. The income started to grow. Obviously, it was nice seeing your income grow exponentially. But it was that, like Andrew mentioned, it was that scorecard. What really fueled the fire, though, was that, overcoming those objections and seeing the growth and really building those relationships and delivering that confidence to clients.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's just, growing up and, with my parents being immigrants, didn't speak English very well. I was really involved with, I guess, a lot of things at an early age, and insurance being one of them, right? When there's a car accident, when, there's a theft or something like that. So I was involved with this insurance process since I was young. And it was always a horrible process. It was always a horrible experience for people because, you don't know you don't know about insurance. Not many people know about insurance, and that's what, creates that fear and that frustration because everything is so opaque. And so when I was on the field, I kind of took that as motivation to deliver a better experience for people, walk people through step by step on what is the insurance process, giving them an expectation, what to expect. And that really translated into a much better experience for the client because I was just really bringing it back down to this level where people feel comfortable. Insurance is not really the bad guys in the room, right? Insurance is here to protect you when there's something bad that happens. And because going through all these things, I was exceptionally good, I find, at illustrating that picture, painting that picture for people when something bad does happen. What does that look like, and how do they prepare for it? And when you get them into that state of mind, they start thinking differently, right? It's not just insurance. I'm paying for something that I'm never going to use. It is something that you will use in times of need, and it's best to prepare for it.
How do you guys now? Let's cut right into it. Let's go right into it. How do you guys deal with losing a client? What about if you've been working with a client or a potential client and you've really put in the hours, you put in the detail, you've studied them, you've done everything, all your due diligence, and at the end of the day, they just don't go with you. How do you honestly deal with the rejection of coming to grips where I put in so much time into this client and I knew I had it, but it just slipped away and now I lost it. Now, where does that leave me?
I've adopted something from the military in this realm. It's called an ARR, or an AAR actually, an after action review. So sorry, AAR, after action review. So after that happens, rather than becoming bitter and resentful, which is, historically, that's naturally where our minds want to go. We want to become, resentful and bitter and place blame on the client for not going with you. I like to look at it from a logical standpoint. Let's do an after action review and let's review exactly what transpired. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why didn't the client proceed with us? What could we have done differently to have changed the outcome of this experience? And that's kind of like, I try not to take it personally. Now, of course, it still hurts personally when these things happen, but I try to, deploy that logic to avoid myself from feeling emotional and to prevent these scenarios from happening moving forward.
What about you, Andrew?
I guess, we're talking about the pitch. This is where it gets interesting. My mindset here is that, I'm going into a game. It's like no different than a hockey player going into a hockey game or a soccer game, whatever it is, I'm going into the game. And my game is the pitch. And the way I see it is that, I'm going to execute and I'm going to play my game to the best of my ability in this pitch. And what I tend to do after, if I don't win the client, is that, I take that approach, Mike, where I review the game. And because, my background is in psychology and I just love, understanding the psychology and how to get people to say yes to you, right? I'm going to review that and ask myself, did I play the game right? Maybe I misplay here. Maybe I misplayed there. So every single objection, I don't take it as a bad thing. I mean, I just take it as an opportunity to review my game. Did I play to the best of my ability? Did I misplay here? I could have done better in this angle instead of this angle. Really taking that approach and learn from those, misplays, right? Like, and not dwell on that because, you're going to play the next game. Like if a hockey player goes down and gets upset, I played a terrible game and he plays the next game, he's going to get worse and worse. But, how are you going to get back on the ice, play your best game? You have to have that motivation where, you are reviewing your game, reviewing those misplays, and go out and play your best game again.
Stefan, I'll give you a great analogy. It's just like sports, as Andrew mentioned. Imagine you won every single match you played. Like Stefano does jiu-jitsu. So you win every single jiu-jitsu match that you've competed in. How do you find those incremental improvements if you're always winning? Where we learn and grow, the greatest area of growth and learning is from our losses.
Exactly.
And we need to experience those losses to continue to improve. And as we bring on these individuals onto the podcast, we see that many of them have faced failure. Many of them have faced rejection, objections, rejection, failure. And that is what really has driven them to the success they've achieved today. There's no growth without failure.
Yep.
And I have one final question before we sign off, and that is, now that we've understood that rejection is all a part of life and success, you can't have success without some sort of rejection that follows you at one point or another in your career. The question I have for you is, let's say that there's young college students listening to this podcast right now, and they're trying to get into any space, but the biggest fear that they have is getting into the headspace of, if I get rejected, it's going to kill me. How do you help the people that have put so much weight on rejection, and how can they compartmentalize it and say, this is just still another part of life? Anyway.
I'll let Andrew start on this one.
Yeah, no, this is an area that I think, that I'm passionate about because, we face this all the time. I think the area of growth is in the areas where you're uncomfortable. That discomfort is where you can grow, right? And Mike, how I am with these things. We, when in our early days in Boardwalk, we were in very uncomfortable state. We were going around, talking to our peers in the U.S. Mike did pitches. I really pushed Mike out of his comfort zone, from selling insurance to selling a dream, selling a vision. And I think it's that's just really how you grow. And, you know, you look back, Mike, 5 years ago till, you know, and now, how do you think, you know, you've improved? And I think it's those areas that we push on, and not having that fear of failure, and just keep trying, you know, and don't give up. That's where you kind of push through and you achieve success there. And you look back, you're like, wow, I can't believe I've gone through that. And I think, Mike, you should talk about that, because I think you've done a phenomenal job in the past 5 years. You went from selling insurance to now doing pitches, you know, in the U.S. and everywhere. It's quite incredible. Doing podcasts too. It's
I'm doing
incredible.
podcasts, exactly. So
which I didn't want to do. And Stefano pushed me. You know, sometimes you need, that's another thing. You need good people around you that'll continue to challenge you. You know, this podcast is something that, you know, I see tons of value in it, but it's just like, you know, am I going to put myself out there again? Am I going to have the time to commit to this? Are people actually going to listen to it? And, you know, Stefano's like, let's give it a try.
But that's your form of rejection. You're rejecting yourself and psyching yourself out. But then you have people on your team that said, I've been down this road before and I've seen the rejection, so we're going to eliminate that for you. But it's the driving factor for you. So how did you get over that hurdle? This hurdle right now?
How I got over it is I sucked up my pride, and I realized that, you know what, this is all for the greater good. And like we continue to say, no growth comes with lack of discomfort. So I have to put myself in a position of discomfort, whether it's hosting a podcast, whether it's doing public speaking, whether it's trying to raise capital. Raising capital, like Andrew mentioned, that was a very uncomfortable one.
I think you should talk about that time when we had like an all-nighter in New York City, you know, preparing for your pitch.
Exclusive, let's do it.
Yeah, like I think that was very interesting. The fact that you overcome that, I'm sure you have some stories that, you know, and some emotions going on there.
Yeah.
What's the cliff note on that? What happened in New York City?
Yeah, what happened was Andrew and I were part of an accelerator there called InsurTech New York in our early days of Boardwalk. And we were there doing this incubator, and there was an opportunity that arose to pitch Boardwalk to a group of institutional investors and venture capitalists. So it came up last minute, and you know, the night before, they're like, do you want to present to this panel, this audience, which was an auditorium full of investors, like all sophisticated investors.
Whoa.
And I was like, my initial inclination was like, no, I don't want to freaking do this. I'm not ready. I need to prepare weeks in advance. But Andrew and I spoke about it, and we're like, you know what? This is a good opportunity. Let's give it a try. And, you know, of course, Andrew was going to go up there and do it.
I hope Mike did a lot of the legwork at the back.
So who ended up going on stage?
I went on stage.
And what happened?
So the night before, Andrew and I prepared for this pitch. So we stayed up most of the night, you know, crafting our PowerPoint presentation, kind of like what we were going to speak about. And then the next morning came completely exhausted, you know, out of my element, used to selling insurance and dealing with like small to medium-sized business owners, not dealing with, you know, investors.
Sure.
And we get into that room, and I was one of the first ones up.
I think you were.
So there was like 20 or 30 people that were presenting.
Yep.
And it was just like presentations. You get like a 15-minute window, was it?
Yeah, I think you were first or second. Or no, you were like second or third, I think.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
So we didn't know what position we're in, and all of a sudden we just get in. I haven't even finished my coffee. I sit down. You know, someone pitches for 5-10 minutes. Another guy pitches, and then they're like, "Okay, Boardwalk Insurance is next. Come up on stage, microphone and everything."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Holy cow!" So, anyways, I sucked it up. I did what I knew I had to get this done. I went on stage. Andrew threw the PowerPoint presentation up. The room was full of individuals. Cameras were rolling. Microphones were on. And I delivered the Boardwalk pitch and really brought awareness to the audience. Was it a great pitch? You know, probably not. You know, it wasn't great. Andrew kept telling me how good it was. But I know
But it was your first go.
It was the first go.
Yeah.
And I knew there that, you know, this is just the first. This is part of the process.
Do you know what I take this as? You ever hear of those stories where the dad says, you don't know how to swim, he throws him in the water and see if you're going to drown? That's essentially what it sounds like, where but what did you learn from it?
I learned, you know, basically I learned how important it is to, you know, prepare, how important it is to control an audience and speak with conviction and clarity, and how important it is to put yourself in these situations, because we met a lot of important individuals and we made tons of, you know, invaluable connections from that day. And if we hadn't done that and we hadn't put ourselves in this uncomfortable situation, we never would have reaped the benefits.
Exactly. No, I think that is a very valuable lesson for us.
And now there's a very important lesson. And to see if we really know what we're saying, there's a time where we have to tell everyone where they can find us. And that time is now. So Mike, Andrew, take it away. Where can they find us?
You can find us on the website at myboardwalk.ca, as well on social media. We have now launched the podcast on YouTube and Spotify, the Before Passing Go podcast, My Boardwalk Insurance.
Thank you, everyone.
You remember that? So we're talking about rejection. If I said to you, Andrew, you have to do it a little bit better, what would you say right now?
A little bit better on what?
Just so if you, and this is of course, this is the best part. I love the way we exited that, but you know what? I know how to end it with you. If you had to leave our listeners with one takeaway from this episode, what would that be? That is your exit for today. And go.
I think it's just really getting out of that comfort zone. Being able to, explore options, explore your abilities, putting more skills under your tool belt, just like Batman. You want to put as many tools in that tool belt as possible, because those skills is what going to take you through life.
There are no rejections here at Boardwalk. Gentlemen, I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.